Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and anyone there that has an ear to listen to the truth here on the Investigative Journal. Greg Anthony here, as always, on this Friday. And what a show I have for you today. You know, I'm always looking for people who understand a little bit about the Vatican-led New World Order. And all week I've been talking about Roman Catholicism, the Vatican, way back when Islam first showed up on the scene. And we've been talking a lot about the connections and the possibilities that Rome and the Vatican created Islam for a reason. So I'm constantly looking for people who get it, or at least talk about it. Now, isn't it about time that the mainstream catch on to this? But as Karl Marx said, the first battlefield is rewriting history. And that's exactly what has been done. History, folks, has been rewritten. And so you're getting, when you go to school, when you go to college, when you go to get these American history courses and world history courses, you're not getting the whole story. And in fact, I said a long time ago on my show that I should write my university and ask for all my money back from these history classes that I paid for. Then I remembered I had a scholarship, so I can't. But I know there's a lot of you out there that pay a lot of money to go to school and you got student debt out the year. Ask for your money back, because they're not teaching you the truth, and it'd be a good legal argument, wouldn't it? Secondly, ask yourself, why has the government carved out an exception to the bankruptcy statutes that means you can't file for bankruptcy if you have a large student debt? It's not fair, is it? How many times did Carl's Jr., the guy who started that, file for bankruptcy and then start another restaurant? How many of these rich guys always are filing bankruptcy then start all over again? But you poor students out there are strapped with $100,000 in debt, and you can't file for bankruptcy. It's a scam, and it ought to change. But anyway, you should get your money back anyway for a failure to educate you. You know what? I should get more than those universities for at least bringing this story up. And isn't it about time that people on the mainstream start talking about this? I mean, there's enough evidence to put it on the table. And when you look at it, I'm not saying one way or the other whether this is gospel truth, but it sure rings with a lot of facts and evidence that can be put up against any other theory of how we've gotten to the position of the House Congress of our country is now talking about socialism. And you know, the biggest fear that I have is that pure socialism is going to turn into fascism and really communism, and really what's going on in China and North Korea today transported here, because you know it's easy to control people that way, isn't it? And that's what they're trying to do right now. They want to control everything in your life. You're hearing the Democrats talk about, we want to control your health care. We want to control your education. We want to control what you eat, what you drink, everything possible. What you think and what you believe is already in that equation. And once they do that, most everything that follows is over. So really, what's the three most important things? Understand the government that you grow up in, right? The country, and start there. You should understand them all over the world. Start with your country. Understand the religion or faith you were brought into. The hierarchy of all of these groups, what they're really all about. Understand what type of earth you live on. If you believe you live on a globe, make sure your science is correct. Because there are a lot of people before you, probably millions more than believe that the world is round, believed it wasn't. And you know something? They based it on experimental experiments in science, not on mathematical equations like Einstein. All right, I could get into, we got to do I've done a lot of shows on the flat earth and got criticized for it. But I've done some experiments on my own, and they make more sense than especially on the horizon, the statistics the NASA and the government gives you as far as the curvature of the earth. It just doesn't ring true when you start doing horizon experiments. And that's just one thing I'd like to emphasize. But anyway, I'm looking for people who understand that perhaps the Vatican did create Islam, or at least we should talk about it, because there's a lot of evidence out there, and also that the Jesuits are involved in Freemasonry, things like that. So I found this guy. His name is, Eugene Cummings? No, wait, I got his name here. Herman Cummings. Okay? And he wrote a nice little article that I'd like to paraphrase and read. And let's start out here. Mr. Cummings said, there are hidden documents that link the Vatican to the creation of Islam. Wow. And where are those documents, I ask? Well, maybe in the Vatican archives that are locked like Fort Knox. Both Islam and the Roman Catholicism have so much secret information on each other that it would be a major worldwide scandal leading to disaster for both religions if they were exposed. All right, that's a good thought, Herman. But listen to this. They're not religions, really. No, they both use religion as a cover for their political, social, financial gain and control. I mean, look at all of these religions. These two, amazingly, are very, very similar. A secret deal was made to kill or run off true Christians and Jews in Asia Minor and Africa, but not to damage the Catholic shrines. Isn't that what we talked about the other day? Nor hurt Catholics and Augustine monks. Also to turn over Jerusalem to the Pope. So we're going back a ways. But the Vatican mostly financed the building of the Islamic massive armies in exchange for handing over Jerusalem. But the Muslims double-crossed the Pope in a sense and kept Jerusalem and built a mosque, making it their second most holy site. However, let's discuss, and we're not finished with the Jesuits. Part of their catechism is that when the Pope says something that is contrary to the Holy Scriptures, the Scriptures must be thrown aside. It is stated that the Pope is the vicar replacement of Christ, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and there is but one judgment seat belonging to God and the Pope. These are quotes from the book, Understanding the New Age, World Government and World Religion, New Wine Press, 1998, page 104. The present Pope Francis, Jorge Bergoglio, who's the first Jesuit to be elected to the white papacy, said on May 16th, and this was how many years ago? About 4 or 5 years ago. Christians do not exist outside the Roman Catholic Church. People cannot be Christians without the Catholic Church. A Christian's identity is rooted in it, and that believers cannot stand alone. Now, how many times have you heard me on this show say that Catholicism isn't Christianity? They got it all backwards. Catholicism, if you're a Catholic, you belong to a group that believes in tradition, not the Bible. And specifically, without offending you, technically you're not a Christian. Okay? And Mr. Herman here goes on, now that a Jesuit is the white pope, you can expect much, much more hard-lined approach to Catholicism. Yet there's another front group that the Jesuits do control, folks. And we've talked about this. I'm going to go back 15 years. And I can remember where I was sitting at the time. At the time I was doing maybe 6 hours of radio a day on 2 stations, Republic Broadcasting and Genesis. And one of the topics of discussion was the Jesuit connection to Freemasonry. And I tell you, I got so much criticism back then. Freemasons were writing me left and right. One guy sent me like a 50-page article about why I was wrong and what good Freemasons do. And I failed to really get across to him, and it's probably my fault, that I was talking about a certain level of Freemasonry, because just like there are many Catholics and many priests at lower levels who and many Jesuit priests at lower levels who really don't understand what their hierarchy is all about, the same goes in Freemasonry. It's a step-by-step process, and only the people who get to the top levels, the top degrees, understand what we're talking about here. So let's make that clear. So this front group that the Jesuits control, it's the Freemasons. And that started from medieval stonemasons after castle building became an industry. But by the 1100s, a religious zeal resulted in the construction of thousands of imposing stone cathedrals across Western Europe. The skills of these stonemasons were in high demand, as were members of the guild. This gave rise to classes of stonemasons, which were apprentices, journeymen, master masons, etc. Apprentices were bound to their masters for the cost of their training. The journeymen had a higher level of skill and could journey to assist with their masters. A master mason was considered a free man who could travel as he wished to work on projects. During the Renaissance, the Stonemasons Guild admitted members who were not stonemasons and eventually evolved into the Society of Freemasonry. These became fraternal groups which observe the traditional culture of stonemasons, but are not typically involved in construction projects. Now, remember the Knights Templars that we talked about many times? Their leader was Jacques de Molay. And before he was executed, he passed on certain rituals and guidelines to what became the Freemasons. Even today, Freemasonry has a youth group called the Order of the Demolay. Jesuits infiltrated the Freemasons and perfected it to be their tool to deceive and to conquer. Okay, now, I know there are many people out there shaking their heads. You just made a blanket statement, Greg, that the Jesuits infiltrated Freemasonry. Okay, why do I think that should even be brought on the table? Okay, let me tell you something I learned when I was in Rome during the early 1980s. I was there during the Vatican Bank scandal. And during that scandal, a lot of information came out about a group called the Masonic P2 Lodge. Now, on the surface, or for public consumption, the Vatican and Jesuits will tell you they oppose Freemasonry. They are not a friend of Freemasonry. Okay, they're not involved in Freemasonry. But, at the same time, during this scandal, over 150 high-level bishops and cardinals were outed as being Freemasons. Darn right good evidence. And this appeared in many of the Italian and French newspapers. And no one denied it. And no one was excommunicated, because there's a law in canon law that states that anybody that's a Freemason should be excommunicated if they're involved in Catholicism. But that's just for public consumption. So we got 150 and probably many more involved in Freemasonry openly. They even were giving their code names, and nothing gets said about it in America. So if we know that they're involved in it, you know they're lying to you, and you know that they've infiltrated it. The only question is, when can we get enough information so that people in the mainstream will at least touch on this subject? I mean, that was enough, wasn't it? In the 80s, shouldn't have that been covered in the American newspapers? It never really was. It was so sad when I learned that when I was there, because I was supposedly to send stories over, and I was watching stories that come through Rome that are supposed to go out to newspapers. And back then there wasn't an internet, so they relied heavily on the wire services, which then functioned this way. A story would come through the wire. The wire has customers called newspapers. We didn't have online stuff. They all had to print stuff. And a newspaper would buy the service of the Associated Press or the United Press International. And you'd be in the newsroom in America, and here comes the wire. It'd be coming out. The story would be coming out, and many papers were filled with wire service stories. So basically, you can understand if AP and UPI controls the flow out of Rome, that's why America never gets this good information. Or did. It never got it back then, and still doesn't get it today, because maybe a lot comes on the internet, but it's easily debunked. Every story, like right now, if somebody listens to this that's a Jesuit or a Freemason, they're gonna figure out a way to debunk it without really talking about the facts. So they'll either give you some phony, this guy doesn't then know what he's doing, then they'll try to destroy your character, or they'll try to discredit you. That's how they operate. Okay, so we got the Jesuits infiltrated Freemasonry, and you can bet they perfected it to be their tool, to deceive and to conquer. It was further advanced by Albert Pike, who is said, this is a guy from the States, who is said to have begun the Knights of the Klu Klux Klan. Now, Albert Pike, you can read a lot about Albert Pike. I guess they love him in Washington because there's a big statue of him in one of the parks in Washington, D.C. I guess they do love him. If he's such a scoundrel, and he is from a certain point of view, and our government is looking out for the betterment of all people in our country, they wouldn't put this guy up on a statue, would they? Now, in the book Morals and Dogma, and if you haven't read this, you got to, Pike wrote, Masonry, like all the religions, conceals its secrets from the, inside, from all except the insiders, and uses false explanations and misinterpretations of its symbols to mislead those on the outside who deserve to be misled. See what I'm saying here? To conceal the truth, which it calls light, from them to draw them away from it. Truth is not for those who are unworthy or unable to receive it. So what they're saying is, and they're doing this right today in Washington, all the symbols that you'll see on the Capitol building, inside all of our buildings in Washington, even the way Washington is laid out, are signs and symbols of Freemasonry and this secret society that tells the American people in their books, you're not worthy to know the truth. That's why you get all this fake news and all this misinformation and never getting history the way it should be given to you. So, truth is not for those who are unworthy. So I guess we're unworthy. Now, listen, why do I think that's the truth? I remember sitting one time talking to a high-level Vatican priest. We're sitting there having a glass of wine. And I asked him, I said, why can't everybody see what's in the Vatican archives? You know what he said? He looked at me and said, the people, they couldn't handle the truth. There'd be a mass riot. And I said, yeah, you'd be out of a job too, right? And he kind of laughed. But that's really the truth. They believe that you can't handle the truth. So they give you their lies, and that's how you live, and that's how you die. And if you want to get away from that, come and listen to my show. We're going to die anyway, but at least you're going to die knowing some things that have been hidden from you for hundreds of years. It's been hidden to so many people. So, Masonry jealously conceals its secrets, according to Albert Pike, and it intentionally leads conceited interpreters astray. So they're really leading you astray. Now, who do you think Donald Trump is? Well, next time you watch Trump in the Oval Office or anything, okay? Watch where when you get a shot of him from the waist up, sitting, he always presents his hands with an inverted pyramid. Just watch for that. And you will be shocked. He does it so many times. He's been doing it for 2 years. Okay, so like I said, Freemasonry intentionally conceals its secrets. So that's exactly what the Vatican does, exactly what Islam does, exactly what your governments do. And they only give you the information they think you can handle, and they hide the truth from you because you're unworthy. Now, Pike also writes, the Templars, like all other secret orders and associations, had two doctrines. One concealed and reserved for the masters, which was Lucifer worship. The other public, which is Roman Catholic. So, you Catholics out there, first of all, I was born a Catholic, so I realized I thought I was a Christian, but I wasn't. And you're not if you're a Catholic. And you have to understand that for public consumption, you follow Roman Catholicism and Jesus, but your hierarchy follows Lucifer worship. That's why the Jesuit order, look it up, named the lens in the biggest one of the biggest telescopes in the world in Mount Graham in Arizona, Lucifer. And if you read their doctrines, they'll tell you. They really tell you who they are. Now, from the first to the 32nd degree, this is into how they do this. Masons are taught that Freemasonry follows the Bible in Christian lodges, the Pentateuch in Jewish lodges, and the Quran in Muslim lodges. And if you go into these lodges, depending on where you are, the book will be according to, if you're in a Muslim country, the Quran is there. Now, I found it strange one time when I watched the Pope kiss, I don't know whether it was John Paul II, I think it was him, kiss the Quran. I said, yeah, they wrote it. So one of their secrets they don't tell you. Now, that is the sham fed to new members, the outsiders. Only when you become a 33 degree are you told who the God of Freemasonry is, and that God is Lucifer. Now, in the book, The Secret Doctrine, it says this: Lucifer represents life, thought, progress, civilization, liberty, independence. Lucifer is the Logos, the Word, the Serpent, the Savior. It is Satan who is the God of our planet and the only God. This was written by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, which many world leaders adhere to. And they are 33-degree Masons. Now, what do you think Trump is? He gives you that inverted pyramid. That's one of their signs. And he's giving that to let everybody know in his little group he's with them, even though he sounds like he's against them. Now, the Jesuits have seen to it that all Protestant churches and seminaries have been infiltrated with these teachings. Okay. We're about 30 seconds away from a break. Hey, I want to tell you this. Go to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com. Starting to put up my shows again, but you'll get shows going all the way back 15 years. And you can really get a lot of that history that you've been deprived of right there. And look for yourself. Also, if you get a chance, donate on my page so we can keep this information flowing, because you're not going to get this anywhere. And they don't want to pay for it like they pay these rich guys who are on CNN and Fox, because all they're doing is hiding the truth from you, whether willingly or unwillingly. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour, and let's get right to it here because I got a lot to talk about. We've only got a half hour before the weekend, so let's get to it. The Jesuits, like I said, have seen fit to go into Protestant churches and seminaries and infiltrate them so that that everybody gets together with the Pope. And all you have to do to put that story on the table is to go to some of the writings of and videos of Alberto Rivera, former Jesuit priest, who tells you that was his assignment until he left the Jesuits. And he told you before they killed him why and how they do it. And there's many others that talk about it. So that's a good starting point if you're looking at why Protestantism no longer protests the Vatican. That's why. And you'd be hard to find a Protestant church that does anymore, because they've all been taken over and they're teaching wrong doctrine. At least wrong doctrine if you're a Christian. That's what they say they're a Christian, but really, are they? No. Just like the Vatican says they're Christians. The Vatican even goes far enough to say you have to be a Catholic to be a Christian, which is completely wrong because Catholics aren't Christians. Now, you might be surprised a little bit to learn some of the 33-degree Freemasons that you may have overlooked. Some of them have been, for example, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Karl Marx was a 33-degree Mason. J. Edgar Hoover, remember him? Joseph Stalin. I call him Father Joseph Stalin. He's actually a Jesuit priest. Harry Truman, buck stops here. Winston Churchill. How can these guys all be in the secret order if they're all fighting one another? They're not. They are, for public consumption, at odds with one another. But yet they're all brothers in the Freemasonic 33-degree club. Right? Vladimir Lenin, Yasser Arafat, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, Mikhail Gorbachev, Al Gore, Billy Graham. Oh, Billy Graham. Yeah, what was he doing? Oh, there's some great books on who Billy Graham really was. Go read them. Bill Clinton, Barry Goldwater, Colin Powell. Now, also, Benjamin Netanyahu is a 33-degree Mason. Now, that surprised the author of this article I'm paraphrasing and reading, but it didn't surprise me, because the Knesset, which is like the Congress of Israel, is the same as the American. They sold Israel out. So there's real Jews, and then there's the secret order, just like in America. And all you got to do is go to a lot of Barry Chamish's writing. Barry passed away recently, but he still has his website, and go read some of his stuff. He was from Israel, and he'll tell you the real skinny of it. And I used to have him on my show a lot. In fact, he used to have a radio show on First Amendment until he passed away. And no matter what front these people may have shown the public, they do not worship, and if you're a Christian, the true God. Now, what about the origins? You hear this word Illuminati all over the place. Let's tie it all together. The Jesuits, we've heard, have been banned from 83 countries, and they had to come up with a plan to remain in power. The Bavarian Illuminati was born in 1776 and soon made its way to the USA. There are many who are Jewish by name but are Jesuit by philosophy, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and some people on the internet have coined the term the Papal Court Jews. There are many who are Jewish by name, like I said, but Jesuits by philosophy. And many have attained really high financial positions. They are in the league with the Knights of Malta. Some of the Illuminati's front groups are the Committee of 300, Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, the United Nations, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Bilderberger Group. Members that we know about of these groups are, of course, Ted Kennedy, Hillary and Bill Clinton, Alan Greenspan, Jimmy Carter, Henry Kissinger. It is certain that Obama was brought into the group, as is Trump, or he was in the group, and they selected him president. They knew he was going to be president 15 years ago. So I guess they know who's going to be president in 2 years. And was part of the secret Bilderberg meeting when he won the Democratic nomination and left the press on the plane. Yeah, that's Obama was there. Therefore, there's a string of undesirable presidents since JFK at least. We can go farther than that if you want to. But the Republicans and Democrats have been taking turns destroying our nation, both of them, both in the White House and in the House of Representatives and the Senate, selling out the American people. But yet there's a whole big double cross still on the horizon, folks. And given the history of Rome, given the history of what we just talked about in the Freemasons, our government, the people who are in charge, how the Democrats and the Republicans keep taking turns, one policy then the other, and keep fighting and nothing gets done. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. And the synthesis of their idea, one fighting the other, is going to be simply a one world government, a one world order. And they're moving towards that every day, closer and closer as we speak. And it's about time more people start to understand it and at least research it, because it is the truth behind what even Albert Pike said, the truth that they keep from you, because you're not worthy to know the truth. And what does that mean? Who's not worthy? There are a lot of people. Everybody except those in that little group. That's right. So, I'm going to end that there. We've talked a lot about that. We got a little bit time left here. Okay, let's switch gears here. Again, you're listening to the investigative journal on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You're also going to get this in YouTube, but First Amendment puts that out. and I thank them for that. But when you get my YouTube, you can, if you want to donate directly to me, go to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com, and you can donate there, because we kind of work separately. So go to my website also and give us a hand and try to keep these shows on the air. Let me finish the show this week on a story that I've always said was very important to research. And many times I've been criticized for saying that the founding fathers of the United States had a hidden agenda. And their hidden agenda was linked to a certain august body in Rome. And the idea of the American Constitution had a twofold reason. One was to allow this newfold freedom to overflow in the world, but yet also to allow the Vatican to get into the United States, because they were not welcomed here back then because of their actions in Europe. And, linked to the story where the Jesuits get thrown out of all these countries for trying to overthrow or take control. Which, by the way, most people say today, oh, they don't do that. But the Vatican and the Jesuits never change. They just do it in a different manner. And they're better suited for deception. And you can bet that Facebook and all these different outlets censor these words if there's a large audience. They can't let this get out. They can't let the so-called Jesuit cat out of the bag. The Vatican cat cannot get out of the bag. And so it goes. I was criticized tremendously because I said, I think there's more to this than just the founding fathers had it right, and then everybody since then, has fallen into the grip of the Vatican. I think they had control of this from the beginning. And so did Manly P. Hall. And who is Manly P. Hall? He's a 33-degree Mason. He's a scholar. You ought to read some of his writings because it tells you a lot, and it gives you information about what we talk about in this show and why this information should be in the public eye, why it should be on the public stage, on all news channels for public debate. So we got Manly P. Hall, and in his Gnostic extravaganza, Secret Teachings of All Ages, I'm pulling this off of page 123 of Tupper Saucy's book, The Rulers of Evil. He wrote this book, it's called An Encyclopedia Outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian Symbolical Philosophy, written only in 1988, folks. So we're not going back to the 13th century here. Remarked that, quote, this is what Manly Hall said. He told you, not only were many founders of the United States government Masons, but they received aid from a secret and august body existing in Europe, which helped them to establish this country for a peculiar and particular purpose known only to the initiated few. Now, doesn't that go hand in hand with what we were just reading about regarding how Albert Pike told us that there's one set of facts for the secret group and another for public consumption? The same thing here. So the initiated few only know this. So do you think Trump knows it? Yeah. Do you think Obama knows it? Yeah. Do you think the high-level Jesuits know it? Yeah. Do you think the Pope? Yeah. The Cardinals? Yeah. Now, most histories of the government skim over the Masonic presence. And a great reason is Americans like history told in really easy, iconic fashion. Good versus evil, liberty versus tyranny, heroism versus treason, might and right, says Tupper Saucy. They're not going to buy a heritage polluted by dark spots of mystery. Yet the greater part of American government heritage is almost wholly mysterious. It really is. Now, there's one guy, and I only found one book that talked about what Charles Thompson said to give you, this kind of whets your appetite for why what we say on this show should be not considered conspiracy, but really just more facts to add another side to the story instead of just the left-right paradigm given to you as an American. Now, the man that was best qualified back during the time of the Revolution and just after when this country was formed to become our country's greatest historian back then, certainly the man with the most complete access to the primary sources in the revolutionary cause, was a guy by the name of Charles Thompson. He was a classical scholar, a discreet Protestant steeped in Medici learning. Thompson was known as the perpetual secretary of the Continental Congress. You know what? He inscribed minutes of every congressional session from 1774 until ratification of the Constitution in 1789. With William Barton, a Freemason, he designed the Great Seal of the United States of America. The choice of its Virgilian mottos is credited exclusively to Thompson. Now, Charles Thompson, he was really an accurate scribe. He knew everything. Once the Constitution was ratified, Thompson then, so he's an insider that knows everything back then, right? Once this Constitution was ratified, Charles retired to Harrison County, his country home in Bryn Mawr. He destroyed his personal papers relative to the creation of the new republic. Why? An article by Kenneth Bowling in the Pennsylvania Magazine of History and Biography in 1976 says that Thompson actually wrote a lengthy history of the Revolution, which he also destroyed. Thompson's biographer, Edwin Hendricks of Wake Forest, suggests a fate other than destruction, alluding to, quote, persistent rumors that Thompson's papers are in the Pennsylvania Masonic records. Professor Hendricks assured Tupper Saucy, he said, personally, that numerous inquiries have failed to reflect Thompson's membership in the Pennsylvania Masonry. Whether Thompson destroyed his history or surrendered it to the crypt of secrecy, it is clear that he knew there were certain elements in the formation of the American government that were ignored. He said, if the truth were known, this was Thompson's words, he told friends darkly, many careers would be tarnished and the leadership of the nation would be weakened. And so Charles Thompson occupied the remaining 40 years of his life translating the Bible and the Greek language Bible into English. Still, he was frequently requested to write the definitive insider's history of the Revolution. Dr. Benjamin Rush overheard Thompson's reply to one such request and recorded it in his diary. He said this is Thompson. Now, this will give you an idea of why mentioning the Vatican in the history of this country as well as the Founding Fathers is so important. He said, no, I ought not, for I should contradict all the histories of the great events of the Revolution. Okay, let me just add. What he's saying is that he's not going to comment on the truth. And that goes hand in hand with what I said earlier. The history you're getting in college and in all these history books is just a lie. Or it's embellished. They don't get to this truth. Thompson knew it, and he wouldn't even talk about it. And here's what he said. I ought not, for I should contradict all the histories of the great events of the Revolution and show by my account of men, motives, and measures that we are wholly indebted. Now, he's telling you right here who this country's indebted to, and the Founding Fathers, to the agency of Providence for its successful issue. Let the world admire. This is amazing. I'm trying to get something here. He said, let the world... What the heck is going on with this computer? It's amazing, isn't it? I can't seem to get it. Wow. there it is. This computer sometimes are amazing. They play with you. But anyway, and we're controlled by them. Okay. So anyway, he says, let the world admire the supposed wisdom and valor of our great men. Perhaps they may adopt the qualities that have been ascribed to them, and thus good may be done. I shall not undeceive future generations. So what he's saying is, he's not going to tell the truth about what they really were all about, and he hopes that the qualities that they write about, which aren't true, that someday people that take over will aspire to be great just like them, if they tell a lie, right? That's why you hear all the time, we've got to go back to the way the founding fathers were. Well, if we did know the truth about them, you wouldn't want to. Now, Tupper Southey says he believes that Thompson was meaning to say is simply that no historical account of the American Revolution can be truthful unless it discloses the role played. Now, this is important, the agency of Providence. Notice that Thompson does not, folks, use just the word providence. He could have said, this country's indebted to Providence. Now, what's Providence alone mean? Which back then was understood, they spoke a little differently, understood to mean God or Christ. But he does not say we are indebted to God or Christ. He says we are wholly indebted to the agency of God and Christ. And if Thompson knew the word agency was a synonym for vicar, and can you imagine that a professional linguist wouldn't know that if he knew that the popes had been called vicars of Christ since the 5th century, and he can't imagine that a biblical scholar of his quality wouldn't know that, then Thompson was most likely meaning, I think he meant, that we are wholly indebted to the vicar of Christ, to the Vatican, that is the Roman papacy, to the formation of this country and the founding fathers. And it's amazing, though, and he brings this up. He says, what a ridiculous statement to the post-revolutionary American mindset. Who would have believed such an outrageous notion, coming from even the man who talks the truth? Who would believe it today, folks? That's the real question. We sit here and say it today and nobody believes it. They wouldn't believe it back then. But I think more people would have, because it was still fresh in their minds what the Vatican was really all about. And the embattled, degenerate, dying papacy could not possibly, this is back during this time, have effected the revolution. Anyone foolish enough to run with this idea would have crashed headlong into a wall of ridicule, similar to what we run into today. For Thompson, there was no future in telling what he knew. Since he chose not to undeceive future generations, the American people have lived according to histories that can be contradicted by truth. They have been served by careers and leaders that truth could tarnish and weaken. They seem comfortable in their deceptions, which is generally the case of consenting subjects to the Roman rule. Generally the case today, folks. That's exactly what it is. People are more comfortable with lies, thinking they're truth, or not even looking for the truth themselves. We see the Jesuits. They're the architects of the Enlightenment, and I say they're the architects of the American Revolution. How they thought of a scheme to pit England against France. What was their motive? Back during when this country was first formed, there was only a handful of Catholics. There was only one diocese. And Washington was built on the first bishop here, a Jesuit bishop. That was his land, Washington, Carroll family. And since then, this religion has grown. It's the largest one in America, right? Look at how it's grown. They could have never gotten in here if there wasn't a clause in our Constitution that stated freedom of religion, right? So what do we have? I believe we have a group that got in here, and they act very deceptively, almost like lambs when they only a few, but now they're turning into wolves. Similar to what we talked about yesterday of what Islam does when Islam comes into a country and multiplies its numbers. Go to my show yesterday and you'll see the similarities. But the Vatican has multiplied its numbers here and they're about ready to take full control, but in a real deceptive manner. That's what this show, folks, is all about and why you have to listen to it. So please, go to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com. Get shows going back over 15 years. Please donate a few bucks if you have it to keep this going because it's not viable to get advertising or even to get, this on the air of major stations, which is a huge story. It'll never happen because they're being controlled by the very same group we talk about. Okay, I hope you have a good weekend. Be with the ones you love. Have fun. Enjoy yourself. And remember, come back Monday to the Investigative Journal. Got a lot more shows. Thanks for being here. Have a good weekend. And see you Monday on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.